everyone. Welcome to It's a Crime and Shame tonight. It is Friday, so TGIF, everyone. Sorry we're a few minutes late. It was Charmain's fault.
Yeah, I'm having microphone issues, so let Aspen know if you can't hear me.
No, you're golden, at least on my end. And we have Charmain and Travis with us tonight. Travis, welcome.
And always love being here. Looking forward to this. Brings back a lot of memories.
I'm so excited. Like, you have no idea. I'm so excited.
So I'm kind of a novice when it comes to this case. I don't know a ton about it. So, you know, always the best thing to do when you don't know a lot about a subject is to not speak on it a ton, but to bring in people that are smarter than I am, that know more about it to actually talk about it. So I'm going to let Charmain and Travis do most of the talking tonight. I say that.
I'm excited to have you here because it's so it's so rare that I know more about a case than you do, number one. And number two, I've been following this case for so long, and I'm sure Travis can relate, that we know what we know, and it's hard to think outside of that information. So questions that you're going to have that come up it's going to help us, you know, clear the cobwebs, maybe, hopefully. I bet you.
Well, I hope. Before we jump into everything too much, I do want to say there's not very many people here yet, but I do want to say hi to Cecil Hotel. I want to say hi to Travis again. Sharon Parker, good to see you. Lacey, it's good to see you. Ben, it is good to see you. Elizabeth, Betty, it's good to see you. Jennifer Hill, good to see you. So, and it looks like most of the people that are here know a lot about this case or have followed it. So I know that normally, you know, we talk a lot about Delphi and other true crime cases on this channel. So if anyone's watching that is not familiar with the channel, I'm going to let Charmain and Travis introduce themselves really quickly because they're both incredible people. And, you know, if you just want to give a quick introduction to yourselves.
Well, everybody, most people in chat know me. I'm Charmain. I have a podcast, True Crime Story Podcast, and I come on and I join Aspen and Sunny whenever they invite me. And I've always been into true crime, and I have some education, some experience, and so that's who I am and what I'm about here.
Excellent. And how about you, Travis?
Well, thanks for having me back again. I'm a lawyer down in Central Texas, and I come on to various channels, including this one, which I always enjoy, to try and answer legal questions that people have about various true crime cases as they're going along, and try and provide a legal perspective on cases and answer procedural questions. And then this particular case I was involved in indirectly, peripherally. I had a client contact me that was interested in the case, saw the first part of a 3-part documentary on HBO about the case. And they wanted to know whether they should be involved as a supporter, one. Number two, they were considering contributing money towards funds for experts. And so I went and vetted the case and made various trips to different locations to get all the information I could and relayed that to my client. And they ended up contributing significant amounts to the expert fund, and that ultimately allowed Dennis Reardon and his team to work out the plea deals that they did. And I've just been kind of following it here and there ever since then. So that's me.
And Travis, what time frame was that? Just because I mean, I know that this case goes all the way back to '93, but when did your peripheral involvement begin?
So I actually got that call. I believe the documentary came out in '97.
The first one was 96.
96, yeah.
96. I think I got, they didn't see it when it first came out. They contacted me a couple of years later. I want to say 98, 99. And then I got really significantly involved in the research in 2000, 2001.
Okay. Okay, excellent.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I'm excited to hear more about that. Is there anything that either of you wanted to say quickly before I let you kind of just dive into everything? And Sharmaine, you'll have to just tell me what you want me to do.
Right. So just to kind of, as we go, I'll have things to share. So I'll let you know when I'm sending something your way to pop up or whatever, or to allow me to share it. Yeah. And I don't remember exactly. I suspect it was something to do with the Delphi, Richard Allen's confessions. And Travis was in chat one day and I had made an off the cuff comment about false confessions. And I said something about Justin Miss Kelly. And Travis piped up in chat and I just automatically like zoned in, like, what? You were involved? You know this stuff? And I had also said some things about Judge Burnett, the presiding judge. And Travis also had other information about that. And I'm really looking forward to his information and his perspective. And just because we've been planning this, I have been going back through everything. I don't think that there is a podcast, a book, a YouTube, anything that I haven't watched. And I've been trying to rewatch to refresh my memory. But there's so much information out there. We're talking 30 years ago, 31 years, 31 years last week, just a couple of days ago, actually. So, yeah, that's about all I wanted to say to preface what we're going to get into here. And we'll keep an eye on chat because I'm looking forward to everybody's feedback and their opinions. And respectful debate is always good. Yeah, just like normal, I guess. Be nice and I'll be nice. And Travis is always nice. And Aspen can play moderator if we get heated. Because sometimes that can happen in cases like this because it's so controversial and there's so many different ways to see things. We'll just put it that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jennifer Hill says, and thank you, Jennifer, she says, just a reminder that the anniversary of the three boys' murders was May 5th, 1993, which was 31 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Ben says, rest in peace, Stephen Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers. So, and those are the 8-year-old victims. In the case.
Yes. And there was a movement a lot of years ago, and it kind of kept up. But the real West Memphis 3 is Stevie, Michael, and Christopher, and we must never forget them. And that's really what this fight is still all about. Really, let's figure out what actually happened, because I think Travis will agree with me that the trial didn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt anything. So, like you guys in chat obviously already know, May 5th, 1993, Chris, Michael, and Stevie went out for a bike ride after school and disappeared. Come 8 o'clock that night, I believe it was Chris Byers. It was, what was his name? John Mark Byers.
John Byers.
He made the first call to the police to report his son missing. And then shortly after that, the Moore family, Michael's family, called in and reported their son missing as well. And then close to 9:30 at night, Stevie Branch's stepdad, Terry Hobbs, made a call from a payphone when he was picking up Stevie's mom from work to report Stevie missing. Right. So that's kind of what happened that day.
And so, correct me if I'm wrong. So I believe the last official sighting of the boys was around 6 p.m. when they were on their bikes headed to North 14th Street, headed towards Goodwin.
Goodwin, that's right. And that's, I believe, towards the Robin Hood Hills area, or Robin Hood Park,
Which
is
is
what
where
they
they
called it.
found.
That's where they were ultimately found, you bet.
Okay.
So from my memory, and I didn't go back this far, but this is just completely off my memory. The dads, Mark or John Mark Byers, Terry Hobbs, and was his name Michael Moore? I'm sorry. The dad, I think his name was Michael Moore as well. But they were all out searching, and some of them did search in the woods, but they didn't see anything that night. We'll get into some of the other stories that came out way down the road later, but they didn't see anything that night. The police didn't see anything that night. They couldn't find anything. The following day, I don't know how to kind of get into how the boys were found, but basically one of the what are they, juvenile like youth workers, whatever, was just kind of looking around in the Robin Hood's drainage ditch area, and he spotted a sneaker, and he called it in, and a detective, Steve Mullen, I believe, went in to retrieve that.
That's Delphi.
Oh, Miller then. Miller, very close. But yeah, see, this is all my memory and probably jostled a little bit. But yeah, so he went down to collect that running shoe, and so now he's inside in the water in the drainage ditch, and just kind of feeling around and bent over, feeling around with his hands, and he felt something, and it got caught on his foot. And as he was kind of unsticking his foot, I don't want to get caught saying things I shouldn't say. One of the little boys' bodies rose to the surface. So then, of course, the cavalry came in, and the other boys were found. And unfortunately, they were removed from the ditch before the medical examiner arrived, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, was close to 3 hours later after they were pulled.
Yeah, I think they were found at 1:45 p.m. and then they were pronounced deceased at 4 p.m.
Yeah. So that's very unfortunate. Having said that, though, they were in the water, submerged completely in the water for well over 15 hours at least, because the medical examiner couldn't pinpoint the exact time of death.
Right, and I have a question about that later on when we get into it, because I know there was discrepancy about the time of death with this case as well.
Yeah.
Where law enforcement said one thing, the medical examiner said another thing, and there was some discrepancy about even, I guess in Jesse's confession about when the murders took place. So
yes, there's a lot of discrepancies with that. So okay, I don't know really where to go just talking about it, but from there, let's jump ahead to, so they did their investigation, and by June 6th, I want to say, they had brought Jesse Miskelly in for an interview, and they had already had information to investigate Damien Eccles and Jason Baldwin. Due to his association, he was best friends with Damien. Damien was an oddball. He had psychiatric problems. He was hospitalized a minimum of 3 times in 1992. He had violent outbursts. He was a drug user. He was a drinker. He was medicated for mental issues. I mean, he did have problems. He walked around dressed all black. He always had a trench coat on and combat boots. And back then in the Bible Belt, and Travis had another term for it the other day, but right there in the middle of the Bible Belt, they were considered to be odd. And depending on what side of the fence you land on, some people say, well, that wasn't uncommon in West Memphis. It was just everything about Damien and rumors about his behavior and stuff made him even more oddball. And then you add on top of all of that, the clothing he wore, the heavy metal music that he listened to, the Jerry Driver actually was his juvenile officer, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah. He is the one that actually tipped Damien into the West Memphis Police Department to be investigated. So right off the bat, it was almost stereotyping and profiling, in my opinion. I don't know what Travis thinks about that, but I mean, at that point, obviously later on, there were other things that came out that might have steered them more diligently towards Damien. But anyways, so like I said, they were trying to get information about Damien. So they brought Jesse Miskelly, who was a known associate or friend of Jason Baldwin, who was best friends with Damien. And 46 minutes of his interview was recorded, but he was at the police station talking to them for over 12 hours. This boy had an IQ of 73, and I shouldn't say did because he still does. He was borderline mentally handicapped. I don't know if you can say the R word on here, but I'll play a little bit of it, but his confession was very disturbing, like extremely disturbing, but he got very important pieces of information straight out wrong. And the police would kind of lead him to what they needed to fit. So do you have any information that you want to talk about, Travis, about the confession? Because everything that I have about the confession, I mean, it's from court documents and stuff, but it is, I can't speak to false confessions or anything like that. I can read the confession and I can play the little clip that I have, but to actually talk about how the police did that, or even what your thoughts are about it, really.
Well, a couple of things. That area is definitely in the Bible Belt, but that particular area I was termed the buckle of the Bible Belts, right?
Right, that's what it was, right?
Dead center. And then about a month, 5 weeks had gone by and nobody solid. And they put out a reward for information leading to the arrest of the person or persons who committed the offense. I'm trying to remember what the amount of the reward was.
Was it $25,000?
35,000.
25 or 35.
Yeah, I think it started at 25, and it's definitely in the 30s.
Right. They used that in part of the interrogation with Jesse, I believe, right?
Yeah, and so Gamer mentioned, about it, but he didn't have a parent or an attorney there, and
he was 16. Sorry.
No, but his dad knew. They came, said, "Hey, we heard you might have some information about this as a witness. We'd like you to come and talk to us about it." Real friendly, and they're picking him up. I can't remember if it was at his dad's garage where he worked, and Jesse worked around there helping, or if it was at their trailer. But regardless, the last thing Mr. Miskelly says to Jesse is, "Hey, tell him some good information so we can get that reward, and we'll get a new truck." And you have to understand, 30,000 to these people in that area at the time be like 3 million to us. And so they had, kind of, one lady went down there with her 8-9-year-old son to give information, and maybe we'll be getting into this later, but so he goes down. We know it's undisputed, nobody disagrees, at least 2 hours of interrogation and questioning took place before the recorder came on. The defense has a longer time, but nobody disputes it was at least 2 hours. So we don't know. And then the defense had two experts, one of which was Dr. Afshi from California, who at the time, he and one other gentleman pioneered the scientific approach to what the red flags were for false confessions, how you get somebody into a false confession, how you can tell if something's a false confession, and most importantly, that people will falsely confess. Now, at that point in time, we didn't have the DNA exonerations like we do now, and it was in the time frame when even with somebody as solid and as renowned as Dr. Afshi, it was nearly impossible to get a jury to believe that somebody would falsely confess. And that's kind of what they were up against. But those were the comments I'd written down about where you're at so far.
I do have a clip. It's from Paradise Lost 1, and it's just a small portion of Jesse's confession. And then Dr. Afshi actually talks at the end of this clip. If Aspen wants to pull it up.
And before we run that, I know you have a few different clips, and we're just using these clips to have a educational discussion about the trial to help explain for educational purposes what happened as part of the background.
Right.
Okay, absolutely. Charmaine, I have a quick question, and it's just because I think you had said about how law enforcement first became aware of Damien, and I'd read a whole thing, and if this might, I don't want to step on toes, so if this is something you're going to get into later, I'd read something about, because it piqued my interest when I read the term Muddy and Bloody, but there was something about a woman named Narlene Hollingsworth, who who sometime between 9:30 and 10 p.m. on May 5th that night called police and said she saw Damien and another boy, and they appeared muddy or bloody, whatever. So that's kind of where I thought that the original tip came from. So thank you for correcting me if it was someone else.
Yeah, I don't think, as far as I know, and like I said, like all I know is like the filings that, like, I've got them all and I'll pull them up later if we have time. But she volunteered that, and she came forward with that information afterwards. And if I'm not mistaken,
That's
there
right.
wasn't the sighting Damien with his girlfriend and Jason, but then they were, well, you can't say they were at home during the
time. And it was 2 or 3 members of a family say that they saw them walking on the frontage road near the truck car wash, Robin Hood Hills area. And then my recollection is the story kind of progressed, but yeah, that's right. I think it was definitely a later time. I can't tell you how much later, but the probation officer, the juvenile probation officer, really had it out for Damien and was doing a lot of things proactively that really he had no business doing, but when those reports came out later, it was really astonishing what he had written and what he was doing, unbeknownst to law enforcement. And, he was, in my view, clearly the spark.
Mhm.
And then, my recollection, they were talking with him, the detectives who should have been doing all of these things. And then they heard that Jesse knew Damien, had been hanging out with Damien. So they figured, okay, well, we'll interview Jesse and see if Damien, talked about it or, slipped up and said something that they could pursue that way. That was
Because they interviewed Damien quickly, right? Like May 7th, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Like he was interviewed a number of times, but I think the first interview was May 7th.
Yeah. And actually,
And
somewhere.
there were no notes. Then, and I read that there were no notes taken whatsoever during the interview. The very first one.
right. And that first one, I'm almost positive was prompted by the juvenile probation officer saying, "Oh, it's clearly Damien, and
Mhm.
so they kind of locked in on that, but then nothing, zero, after a month, and then they offered a reward, and then things started coming in.
Okay.
Believe they talked to, because of this reward thing, I believe there were over 100 interviews in this case.
Mhm.
Wow. And how big is West Memphis? If you don't, like, just to get an idea of the area. I mean, like I know the general area it is, but like how big is the town? Like, is it rural?
It's the two major crossroads, I-40 north-south, and then major interstate east-west. They intersect there. It's right over the Mississippi River from Memphis. A lot of trucking, and but the city of West Memphis and surrounding area, if I had to guess, 25,000.
Okay, so
That
suburban.
Yeah, and relatively poor, very, very blue collar, very, everyone goes to church on Sunday. They're have families there and Little League and Cub Scouts and, all those and they're like they're in Arkansas and then, right over the river, Memphis with with a bustling economy and all different kinds of industry and, much better economics. Although, there are parts of Memphis, they're pretty depressed also, but it's rural Arkansas, right on the border. And, lot of things. There's nothing for kids to do there except church and whatever activities they get into in terms of organized activities related to church or sports or school or scouting. Really nothing to do there. No jobs for kids to speak of. A lot of single parent families. And so in essence, it's an area ripe for kids to get into trouble unless, they're occupied by other things. And then, a lot of them, they don't get out because there's no real good educational pathway. But
Yeah.
that's about the best I can describe it. I think I've been there, I want to say 4 times. I went up there between 2000, 2005, and went up there real early before things had changed too much. And then eventually, you know, that whole area, what they called the Robin Hood Hills, was
Yeah.
completely cleared, and you
Really?
can't even tell it. The truck car wash, this Beacon car wash, taken down. The U-turn is still there, but yeah, we'll take a look at maybe some aerial photos tonight. But yeah,
I know the 8-year-old me would have been right where those little boys were playing, because that looked like a haven for like an incredible place to have an imagination and play all sorts of games when you're a little kid. Like when I saw the pictures of Robin Hood Hills, I was like, that's a dream come true for any little like kids playing. And you know, so heartbreaking that it happened there.
So the neighborhood, for that type of area, it was you know, it's subdivision, sidewalks, roads. I mean, for the area, you know, nice neighborhood. They, you know, single family homes, and 3, 4 bedrooms, single story, probably in the 1,500 to 1,800 square foot. You know, to me, the neighborhood, you know, was nice, and there was an area, we'll see from an aerial, that was an apartment place that looked pretty rough at the end of where the street dead ended into Robin Hood Hills, and where they suspected a lot of people with criminal histories there. But this neighborhood that they lived in, just a, you know, nice middle class to lower middle class neighborhood.
Some of the best kinds.
Mm-hmm.
So Charmaine, do you want me to play? Or you want to play like
Sure.
like I think you have control. So if you
No, I'll hit play on this.
What occurred while you were there?
When I was there, I saw Damien hit this woman.
And just boost the volume.
Real bad. Then he started screwing him and stuff.
What did he hit him with?
He hit him with his fist and bruised him all up real bad. Jason turned around and hit Steve Branch.
Okay.
And started doing the same thing. Then the other one took off. Michael Moore took off running. So I chased him and grabbed him and held him till they got there, and then I left.
Well, I was telling them, you know, I don't know nothing about it. And they just kept on egging it on. Finally, I just said something where they just leave me alone. And finally, I told them, you know, I chased them and everything and caught them and brought them back. But none of that happened. You know, you can't kill nobody and don't leave no evidence. You can't do it. You know, I don't care who you are, you cannot do that. You know, there was no blood, no fingerprints, no nothing at the crime scene. You just can't kill nobody like that. I don't care if you're a genius or nothing. You just can't do that.
Inspector Gitchell, let's talk about the things that Jesse told you that are just absolutely incorrect. Now, on page 9 of his statement, Inspector Gitchell, Jesse says that the murders took place around noon. How did you know that was incorrect?
Because the young boys were still in school.
Did at any time when he was telling you these things that you knew were incorrect, did it ever occur to you that what he was telling you was false? His entire story was false?
Jesse simply got confused.
This is a classic example of how police can produce a false confession. They threaten Jesse. They tell him that he knows things that they know he knows. They use the polygraph. They tell him that he's flunked the polygraph when he didn't. They use that to convince him that his situation is hopeless. They upset him enormously by showing him these horrible photographs of these dead children. And then they give him the option of being with the bad guys with the consequences of that, or joining the police. And at this point, all he wants to do is get out from under the pressure. So now all he has to do is agree with what they tell him, and that's how they set it up. Initially, they're going for a false witness statement. But once they have him talking, it's not difficult to get him to agree to things that will make him appear to be a participant in the crime.
What occurred while you were there?
So I mean, it's, to me, it's really hard to fathom somebody giving a false confession like that. But at the same time, this was so early on in their investigation. What was in the law enforcement's mind to do this? Because a lot of the information that Jesse was giving them was just factually wrong, and they knew it. But I don't understand the benefit of leading him down that road.
Well, they were just under tremendous. Well, West Memphis PD was under investigation by the Arkansas State Police. There was missing drugs from the evidence room and missing cash from the evidence room. And,
oh my gosh, I forgot all about this. Yes, Travis, do tell. Oh.
Okay, so the best people to investigate this were the Arkansas State Police, and but they wouldn't let them near the case. They could have invited them in to assist. So this situation, so I want to try and draw some parallels. So between this case and, a lot of other cases like Stephen Avery and the Delphi murders, three boys clearly murdered, no question. And it's been a month, and so they offer this reward, and through incompetence or whatever, they these false confessions, the cases where we know people have falsely confessed through DNA, and then you come back later and well, why on earth would you confess? And so the Reed technique, which is what they were using on him, from what we can tell from what was recorded, you're not supposed to use it with juveniles, not supposed to use it with anybody that's mentally compromised, and it's easy to get a false confession, and so you have to be extremely careful about it. And John Douglas was one of the experts on it, and later on, and he was pretty appalled about the whole thing, because the FBI, they're used to false confessions, and they've been burned on those a lot in the past, in the 60s, and so they're maybe they're more attuned to it. I don't know, but so it's hard to say what the mental state is, but you get people with tunnel vision, and they're under a tremendous amount of pressure to solve this thing. They've cut themselves off to the folks that have the best resources and are best equipped to deal with it. I want to say West Memphis PD at that time, maybe 25 officers, 3 detectives, maybe. They had a drug squad that was under heat from Arkansas State Police. And these things just, end up being like a perfect storm, domino effect. That's what you end up with. And then, I don't know if that answered your question, but, everything was in place for a perfect storm. And then, it just started compounding itself from there.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question really quickly? So, I know that the social worker or the caseworker kind of like set this all in motion, but it like I said, it happened pretty quickly, and so who like I've seen different investigators' names when I was the little bit I've looked up. A name I saw repeatedly was Durham. Another name was Shane Griffith, maybe. And there were a handful. So I mean, who are the main players as far as law enforcement here?
So we've got Brian Ridge. I don't know how you're supposed to say that.
Gary Gitchell.
Gary Gitchell.
Sudbury.
Yeah. Those are the main ones. And then, like I said, it was Steve Miller, I want to say. But is Miller Delphi or Mullen Delphi?
Mullen is Delphi.
Okay, so it would be Miller then. He was big in it too. Officer Meeks, Rebecca, is that her first name? Meeks? She was initially involved just in the original call. I guess we could back up and talk about Mr. Bojangles a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, who's okay?
Mr. Bojangles, yeah.
Somebody messaged me today randomly, and they were like, "Oh, you're doing West Memphis 3 tonight. I can't wait to hear about Mr. Bojangles." And I went, "Who the F is Mr. Bojangles?" Never mind. I don't have time to talk about it.
Yeah. So there is a fast food restaurant that's not too far from the area that we're talking about right now. And either just before or right as the missing persons calls were coming in, the police were called to Mr. Bojangles' restaurant due to a black man being in the bathroom, and I believe he went into the women's bathroom, covered in blood. His arm was bleeding profusely. He was in there smearing blood and feces and just being gross in there. The store manager went in and asked if he was okay, and he mumbled that he was fine. They gave him a few more minutes before they called the police to come and help get this man out, because they couldn't have a muddy, bloody man in the restaurant. And so this officer Meeks came to the restaurant to investigate, and she pulled into the drive-through. She went up to the drive-through window and asked basically what was going on. From what I understand, and maybe Travis can correct me if I'm wrong here, but they kind of pointed out what direction he left in. She basically told him, get rid of whatever, just clean up the mess, whatever. But this was, like I said, before they knew there were missing boys. So the next day, when they realized that there could be some kind of a connection here, they went back to the restaurant, and was it the hotel or the restaurant manager that took the scrapings, or did the police actually take the scrapings?
The manager assisted them the next day in pointing out where different things were, and then they collected blood.
Right. But I think the man had left a pair of sunglasses in there.
Yep. And the manager had them and gave them to the police.
Mm-hmm. And there was a roll of toilet paper that was saturated in blood that he threw away.
Yeah.
And then like, I don't know the best way to present this information, so I'm just going to tell you. So come trial, Brian Ridge was on the stand to answer to this evidence and what it showed. And he admitted that he had lost that evidence. It never actually made it to any lab for testing.
Was this something that the defense brought up in trial as part of like as some other guy did it, defense type?
Third party defendant, they got it in, they got on the stand that, they asked him, Detective Ridge, okay, and the attorney did a good job on it, in the video. He goes and he asks, well, okay, now where's that evidence? And then the detectives, and it came out on cross. I don't know why they didn't bring it out on direct, but came out on cross. I lost it. And then the defense attorney looks all shocked. You lost it? Yes. And then you kind of tell they had him prepped. It was due to my negligence, his exact words. He lost it, but they got in all of that third party suspect, no connection. And I think because evidence was lost, that the judge allowed all of that to come in.
Okay. So other than like the timing and the like circumstances, was there anything that connected this guy to these victims or the crime itself?
Nothing other than the time and location.
There's one little, I guess you have to take a little bit of a leap, but in one of so when the boys were taken out of the drainage ditch, they were wrapped in a sheet and then put into body bags. In one of the sheets, there was a negroid hair, and that's not my word, that's the word, but there was a negroid hair found in the sheet. Whether it came off one of the bodies or was already on the sheet, we don't know. But being that there was an African-American man who went into Bojangles, that just raised more reasonable doubt, really. I mean,
yeah, I've totally forgot about that. But negroid is that term is still used today because it's the anthropological.
So politically correct still these days?
Well, it's just that's in anthropology, whatever the types of hair are, but I don't even know what the anthropological term is, but somebody of African descent, that's just the name. But that is one of the things that they can tell, but not much more. And, years and years ago, they would, you'd get hair analysts and, they'd quote, match, unquote, somebody due to hair. And, that was just determined, you can't do it. About all you can do is say it's similar, but I forgot about the negroid hair. And so, yeah, there was possibly that.
So conversely, I mean, other than, like the caseworker that like tipped off Damien, like what evidence was there linking the three, teenagers that were arrested to the crime, other than Jesse's confession? I'm just curious.
So we'll have to fast forward to trial a little bit, which I don't mind at all. But we had girls who had overheard Damien at a softball game talking about them being the person who did this in a roundabout way. I don't remember the exact wording of that, but they just overheard him. And what came out later after they were released from jail and Damien was able to talk about some of this stuff, he had said that what he thought that came from, he didn't deny it, but what he said was he had heard chatter about, oh, there's him, there, that's Damien, he killed those little boys and stuff, and being Damien who he was back in those days, he was the confrontational one. He was always looking for the attention, and he didn't mind being afraid of, and so he was running his mouth, just kind of showing off, or however you want to, do you know what I'm saying? So these little girls were able to tell law enforcement and the prosecutor that, well, we heard Damien say this, and they honestly did. But the other side of that is that Damien had heard them pointing and being scared of him and stuff directly before that. And so he was just feeding into their fear.
Yeah, in essence, that, you know, he heard all of this chatter, and he said in a clearly facetious, joking tone, according to him, oh yeah, I killed those girls.
Yeah.
I shot the clerk. Oh, but he's like, yeah, I killed those girls. Yeah, right. And
It's
then
just
later on, one of those girls at the softball thing said that, yeah, it was clear he was laughing about it and joking about it, and he wasn't serious. She recanted. That was part of the post-conviction.
Yeah.
When Dennis Reardon came on board, then they had those couple of people that were related said they saw Domine and Damien in the area at the time. And then forensically, they had two types of fibers.
Right.
They had a fiber from something one of the three boys had on, that was found on Jason's mother's bathrobe.
Yeah.
Similar. And then they had two fibers from a Boy Scout scarf that were found in Damien's place somewhere, right?
Right, in his room, yeah.
So there was a fiber linked to the crime scene to Damien?
Similar to.
So, okay.
Two fibers to Damien and one fiber to Jason's mother's bathrobe.
But they also conceded that bathrobe fiber, that bathrobe could be found at any Walmart in the country. So it's not an uncommon fiber, and Boy Scouts, they're also not uncommon, and the fabric of those scarves are not exclusive to the Boy Scout. The Boy
Scouts.
That's
Walmart country.
Right.
And so then they sent a diver in to the lake.
After alerting the media, don't forget that part. After alerting the media,
and they had a diver come out with a diving knife that, you know, there was nothing, you know, they found a knife in the lake that
Jason's mom said that she had thrown that knife in the lake a year before because her son didn't need a knife like that. They called it a Rambo knife. It was a big hunting knife with the sharp edge and then the serrated top on it. But they were saying that, so the boys had these scratch marks, these scrape marks on them. And the prosecution was trying to say, and Frank Peretti, the medical examiner was trying to say that they were injured. Those scrapes came from the serrated side of that knife. Like whoever killed them was taking the knife and scraping their skin. Like they didn't have any stab wounds, not a single stab wound.
Yeah,
but they were.
I've seen the pictures.
Yeah, so they're, you know, being tortured or tickled or what, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't even make sense in my head. But they had the media there within half an hour of the diver going in. They found that knife exactly where they were tipped that it was there. But in my opinion, and I've never been able to dig far enough to know that Jason's mom is the one that tipped that knife in. It said, Jason used to have a knife. I threw it in the lake. I stood right here and I threw it in the lake. And I mean, it sounds like I'm trying to say that the police purposefully and methodically set these guys up. And I don't think that. I think that, and no different than Richard Allen, I think that they truly believed what they were doing.
Right.
And
Yeah, the knife, you know, that came at the direction of the prosecutors, and
yeah, but
you know,
that's what I mean. I think that Mrs. Baldwin had told them that, yeah, my son used to have a knife, but I threw it away. Who else would take that in?
so I think, you know, it was pretty clear that they, you know, had staged that. You had a press conference after Jesse, Miss Kelly's confession, and it's where Gitchell's asked on a scale of 1 to 10, how strong's the 11? How strong's the evidence? And he says 11, and then, you know, has this smirk on his face, and
I haven't seen that. Yeah.
and so, you know, you had a lot of similarities, and then, you know, the state did a lot of, you know, a number of other things to build on this satanic panic that was running around the country at the time. But
Terrible.
and, you know, and in West Memphis, you know, there was these rumors about, you know, there were satanic meetings going on and this and that, and
the SBATs, like the meeting of the witches,
SBAT, yeah.
and the orgy, and because that all came from Vicky, right?
Vicky Hutchinson, yeah, the mother of the 8-year-old little boy,
Aaron.
Aaron, yeah, yeah. Which, you know, I don't know if everybody did their homework and went and watched West of Memphis, but she ended up admitting that she made it all up, every bit of it. I've got a little clip that will, just the trailer of the West of Memphis show, just kind of runs through it really quickly. But she admitted she made the whole thing up. She was just trying to get out of some pretty serious charges she was facing. And
Yeah,
she
'cause,
kept,
I mean,
yeah, the reward, and she had some stuff pending, right?
fraud, yeah, like she had stolen money from her employer.
because Aaron, I think, which of course, her 8-year-old son, after she said she went to that orgy in the woods or whatever, in the field, like then the little boy said that, you know, he had seen 5 men sometimes in the woods in that area when he would play, singing songs to the devil and doing, quote, what men and ladies do.
Yeah.
And then a few days later, the 8-year-old then changed his story to actually saying he witnessed the murders.
That's right.
If I read correctly.
You did. And then, so the police actually took their time to investigate that and found that there were many witnesses who saw Aaron at his trailer park during that entire evening. So what he said couldn't have been true. So the police wasted a lot of time running down that rabbit hole. Right. And this Vicky Hutchison with Jerry Driver came up with this big, huge plan to, I guess, kind of entrap Damien. But she had, I believe Jesse did some work for her or something, or they lived close together, whatever. But she talked to Jesse quite often, and she had approached Jesse after clearing this with law enforcement that she was going to do some investigating. And she told Jesse that she really wanted to meet Damien, that she was interested in him. And so Jesse had Damien go over there. Jerry Driver had told her to make sure you have books about witchcraft and occult and stuff laying out. You'll make him feel more comfortable. And so she did. And this is when she said that he invited her to this SBAT. They went, she said that he drove them to this SBAT, this meeting of the witches. And when they got there, Jesse was there, and there were a bunch of other people she didn't know there. They were all dressed in black robes, and they started disrobing and started having an orgy. And she felt uncomfortable, so she told Damien she wanted to go home, and Damien drove her home. Big thing here, Damien doesn't have a car, nor does he have a driver's license, and we find out, like I said, years later, that she made the whole thing up. The whole thing. It sounds unbelievable, but this actually happened, and people believed it. And we say the Bible Belt, or the buckle of the Bible Belt, and satanic panic. I think everybody here is old enough to remember satanic panic. Turn on an episode of Geraldo, or Sally Jesse Raphael, or Donnie, any one of them. They were covering satanic panic in so many bizarre ways back then. And it was real. Like, they believed this stuff. And the FBI believed it too. And they did an entire study on satanic ritual murder. And they decided that there was really no evidence to support there being satanic ritualistic killings. Am I wrong there? I'm pretty sure.
No,
John,
you're right. John Douglas, he told me, and then he, got me a copy of the report that was done, by the same division that they sent out. They had all of these inquiries that they were getting all the time. But, basically at that time, 2010, 2012, he told me that the FBI had not uncovered a single documented case of a ritualistic killing, a satanic sacrifice, not a single one. And now he said, it's difficult to classify those things because we've had murders where people have laid Catholic symbols, but we don't classify those as a Catholic sacrifice. It's just people are staging things certain ways. But he said, there is no documented, not a single one in the U.S., again, 2010, of a satanic sacrifice. Whereas in this case, the juvenile probation officer wrote up this report that that Damien's pregnant girlfriend, Domine, that the plan was that they were going to sacrifice that baby right after it was born. And, just the stuff that they came up with. I mean, it's just, and, they got, a dime store doctor, so-called, in cult, John was just flabbergasted about that guy. And it's really sad. He was a retired cop that went to a mail order university, which since been closed down by the state of California after it was open 3 years. What was it? Columbia Pacific University. He got his quote PhD. He's passed away, but they still referred to him as Dr. Griffiths, and but it's unfortunate. They just got all of these things lined up, and they got all of these quacks and overzealous prosecutors trying to do, I think, what they thought was the right thing to get justice for these families, which is another theme I want to talk about at some point tonight. That, if you get blinders or tunnel vision or, confirmatory bias, it always leads to the same thing pretty much. And that's an injustice.
Right. Travis, when I had a question, and you just brought up tunnel vision, which kind of goes into what I wanted to ask. But from my understanding, that they got the confession, whether it be false, whatever, with Jesse on June 3rd, 1993. That same day, they at 9:30 at night got search warrants issued for the three suspects, issued by a judge, and by 10:30 all three of them had been arrested. And so just from not knowing anything about the case, and and I don't even know all of the stuff. I know that they were released later, but to me, that showed a pretty clear example of what either they had their evidence, they knew these were the guys, and they went in, but the timing there seems so limited that I'm like, all within one day they got that confession, they got the search warrant, and arrested all of them before those search warrants could have even been completely conducted. And so it did make me think, is that an example of
that's a very astute point, is that getting somebody confessing to being involved in the murder and then implicating two others, that's all you need for probable cause for an arrest warrant, all you need for a search warrant. And they didn't have any of the forensics back, but that's all you need is one person to say, yeah, they were there, and it can be a co-defendant. Yeah, they were there, or one eyewitness. I can't remember the affidavits in support of the search warrant or the PCA, but primarily the confession. They may have put the thing in about someone seeing Damien and Domine, but they never arrested Domine, and they put so much into that. She would have had to have been involved. They were on foot. He didn't have a car. She didn't have a car. But that was a huge part of it. Again, the only forensics at trial were 3 fibers, 2 and 1. And I don't know if you have the clip, Charmaine, but they have a meeting with the family, and the order that they do these things in, you do the easy one first, and you get out in the public, the confession that implicates, they severed the trials. Constitutionally, they could not try all 3 of them together. They had to sever Miss Kelly. So they start with that one. Get out in the public that Jesse's implicated, Baldwin and Eccles, get a conviction on that. Then there's a scene in the first documentary were the prosecutors, and these producers, like in the Making a Murderer, had really good access. They had video of the entire trial. They had videos of attorney meetings on the defense, attorney meetings on the state, and one's a meeting with the two main prosecutors talking with the families and saying, look, we're going to have to see if we can cut a deal with Jesse and lower his life without parole down to something where he might be able to get parole, to try and get him to testify against the other two. And I believe in that meeting, the prosecutors say, without Jesse, it's about 50-50 with what we've got, because the fiber evidence isn't conclusive, just similarities. Excuse me. And so, they had really good access. And then you see at the end, that they gave a stipend to all of the families and then to the defense. And then the defense used those stipends to hire experts.
And like I'm reading chat, and I'm trying to go back in my memory and talk about things that did point to guilt, like actual factual things that did point to guilt. And I can't recall anything outside of the fibers, the knife, the statements that Damien had made and overheard by those girls. Is there something else that I'm forgetting? Like, I know that, and I honestly don't know. I was never a card carrying member of Free the West Memphis 3. I do not think that they should be freed. I always believed that they needed a new trial. I thought that the evidence should have been tested, and people like everywhere right now, they're saying, oh, new evidence could, solve this case. It's not new evidence. It's always been there. It's new testing techniques that are a little bit more refined and can get
MVAC, yeah.
MVAC, right. So it's not new evidence. And I don't know if they're cherry picking the evidence that they're testing or if that's literally all that's left. So I'm not trying to say that these guys are innocent at all. I'm saying that it was never proven beyond a reasonable doubt in court, other than those 12 jurors, absolutely, and I respect that. But yeah, I just,
Yeah, no, that was pretty much all of the physical forensic evidence was what we've already discussed, and then they threw on things to appeal to the emotions of the jury, like they do.
But what about the fact that, okay, and this is something that I've struggled with since I learned about it. Okay, so we've got a false confession. Let's say he was led down that road, false confession. The first time, like he confessed 5 separate times. Like that's one thing I cannot reconcile in my head. You do it once, okay, twice, maybe. But I mean,
he kept on confessing. I mean, he changed his mind, and then I couldn't quite understand it either. He'd talk with the prosecutors, and then he kind of get it locked in his head. I got to stick with it. And so even when he was talking with his own attorneys, they're like, listen, we represent you. It's confidential. And, there was a hearing about that in first post-conviction, and Dan Stedham, and if you're interested in this case at all, you got to read his book. It's finally come out. And I corresponded with him for years, asking him, you got to write a book. And then he said, I am writing a book. And
didn't he have to wait until like 10 years passed since the Alford plea? He had to wait?
No.
They had to stay out of trouble or something. Otherwise, they'd wind up back in prison. Something.
Right. They all got 10 years probation suspended after they got out. But he wasn't waiting for that so much. I think that expired.
It would have been 2022, I think.
Yeah.
Were they out 2012, I think?
Yeah. But I was talking with him about 10 years ago, and we were even talking to him to come down to the Austin Criminal Defense Lawyers Association and talk. And he was going around and talking to defense lawyer groups about how overwhelmed he was, and him and his second chair attorney, and the forensics and the science, and just how unlevel things are or were at that time, especially in Arkansas, on dealing with forensic evidence and whatnot. And but I really admired him. Even though he wasn't the attorney and later became a judge, he always stood around, and he was there when they took the Alford pleas and walked out. He just really, really good guy, and he just felt that he had been better equipped, better financed, had more resources, it would have been a completely different outcome. I think he did everything possible. And at that time, you didn't have the public aware that false confessions are not that difficult. And you didn't have 30 exonerations by 2010, where it's just hard, cold fact that people falsely confess to crimes, horrible crimes,
Right.
that they didn't do.
I want to talk to Elizabeth really quickly. Why do you think they got so much support from pretty high profile people? So if you've never seen Paradise Lost 1, 2, or 3, Purgatory, very, very biased, very one-sided. This is the epitome of cherry picking, and it was for a purpose. But this is how all of the celebrities and the public and Free the West Memphis 3 and the whole movement learned about the case. And this is why for so many years, these were the facts of the case. This is solid gold evidence. Like, they knew because they were in the trial. There's footage of the trial. And they truly believed it. And
they put money behind it, right?
They absolutely did with all the fundraisers and the concerts and everything, like Henry
Vedder
and Alvin,
Peter Jackson.
Peter Jackson.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars were raised.
So I have a question about the Alford plea. And Charmaine, I know you pulled something up. I don't know if you want me to play that or if you want me to ask my question.
Ask your question first. This is because I think we're going to change gears to kind of the later stages of this case, like working up to where we are today. And I think this trailer is going to be a good segue.
Like I said, so I mean, like, I know, like, we're already an hour and 21 minutes in, and I feel like now I have more questions than I did even when we started.
It's a crazy case.
So I know that. So my understanding is that in 2007, they, like, they allegedly were exonerated by DNA. I don't know the details, but then there's an unknown male DNA that they still don't know who it is.
No.
It was from the shoelaces.
So that, okay, so this is segue into the next, I think it's a good time to move forward, but they did find hair evidence at the crime scene and they were able to test it and they got a match. And it was one of the stepdads, we'll get into it, and a friend of the stepdads who were out searching in the woods that night.
But in my understanding that some of that is what led to them possibly getting a new trial, which then instead they took the Alford plea.
That's right.
So I just, for anyone that isn't familiar, Travis, if you could explain what an Alford plea is, I would, but I'm almost a lawyer, and since you are a lawyer, I'd rather hear you talk about it.
So an Alford plea is named after a U.S. Supreme Court case with the name of the person Alford, surprisingly, and
they're real imaginative.
What's that?
I said they're real imaginative with the laws,
yeah,
aren't they?
They are. Yeah. So Alford, what they did is it allows you to enter. You don't have to admit that you committed the crime that you do in a normal guilty plea. You can maintain your innocence, and that if you understand that based on the evidence that the court has, even though you maintain your innocence, the court's going to find you guilty, and you consent to the court imposing a sentence upon you, even though you maintain your innocence. And so what the difference about it is this type of thing that we're going to get into that brings us fast forward to today, that if you do an Alford plea in many states, that allows you to keep pursuing your actual innocence in post-conviction.
Like the example I always think of is, and it's the first time I ever was aware of this, is the Michael Peterson case.
Yeah.
Which I don't know, which is a lot. It was the staircase. It was the documentary that was based on his case. But that was where I really kind of like did a deep dive for myself into what an Alford plea was.
Now on that, so when we get more into this, but Jason did not want any plea at all. He wanted to go to trial, and they would have gotten new trials.
Right.
And so Braga, who was part of Eccles's defense team, is still part of his defense team, and who got this most recent opinion, this decision from the Arkansas Supreme Court. We'll go through at the end, but we won't go through it. But he's the one. There was a breakdown in the settlement and negotiations, and the defense just wanted them to dismiss the cases, and they said, no, we're going to try all three again. We don't care, and which was going to take another year to 2 years to try them all, and
right. And they were released on August 19th of 2011. For anyone that
okay.
Curious.
I wasn't sure if it was 2011 or 2012.
And so there were concerns about whether Damien would be able to last another year or two. Jesse, Miss Kelly, they're kind of along for the ride. And, somebody approached Jason and explained where it was. And, he did it to help his friend when he was informed, his health was failing, his eyesight was failing, different things. But when they said, yeah, we can do an Alford plea, he said, so I'm going to be found guilty? No, I want to get my innocence proved, especially all this stuff we have. I want to go to trial. And but it was, the state made it all or nothing. All three had to agree, or deal was off.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, and I think, and part of an Alford plea as well is that, even though they're, maintaining their innocence, they're acknowledging that the state has evidence that could convict them, right?
Yes. That was the stipulation that they had to basically, and I think there's a little bit of that in this clip too, but they basically had to say that they realized that you have enough evidence to convict us if we go back to trial, but that was not.
And then both sides gave press conferences about how it was a win, like you'd expect, defense, and then the state, and then
isn't it about $60 million that the state would have been sued for had they been exonerated? And that was a motive, even that the prosecutor said. He admitted that what, we saved the taxpayers all of this potential, I don't even know what you call it, but money from being sued for a wrongful conviction.
Right.
So.
And just by the way, for anyone in the chat, for anyone that's asking some questions, if I'm not addressing them right away, I am marking them so that when we get to a point, I will ask some of those questions.
And Miranda, I know that you've got that question that you've had for the last few nights, and I will answer it. I promise I will answer your question. But can we play this clip now?
Yeah.
Because this is the one that I've been pushing people to watch for this. I think it's about 4 minutes. It's just perfect. The trailer to the west of Memphis, and just kind of goes through where I want to go next with this, because we're at an hour and a half now, so we need to keep it moving.
Go ahead. Yeah, Charmaine, you're muted. Charmaine, you're muted.
It's because I'm lost. I don't even know where I'm at. Okay.
So I know you did that to me on purpose, because I said I was going to get up and go use the restroom real quick. And immediately I was like, wait, why is there no sound?
Okay, how does that work then? Also, share.
Try to present it again and then turn your volume up.
Window. Where is it?
Hey, Coach Kevin's True Crime Talks. Good to see you. Oh.
Did that work?
Hello.
No, I'm not seeing
anything. Train a coming.
Yeah. Charmaine, I'm not seeing anything. Did you hit present? Because I'm seeing nothing.
Okay, I found it.
All right.
Take two.
Take two.
I'll keep my mic on just in case.
Nothing ever happens. And the terror of mortal men look favorably on my sacrifice. I read the confession on the front page just like everybody else did.
Jesse's borderline mentally retarded.
The statement that this case is nothing out of the ordinary. They're dealing with 3 kids, bottom of the barrel, poor white trash.
I brought in primarily to analyze the case to see, does it really fit the 3 people they have in prison?
They are seeking merely the opportunity to have the fair trial they have never had.
And the reason I'm hesitating, I'm trying to think if that's a question that I should be answering.
I said, just between me and you, did you do it? And he said, yes, and he went into detail. Jason told me how he dismembered the kid.
Did Damien invite you to some meeting?
A cult, satanic meeting. I was just a big liar, and I really was.
I was doing a lot of LSD. I remember not knowing why I was doing what I was doing.
This case is outrageous.
Feeling funny in my mind, Lord.
You're dealing with a horrendous crime. There's savage injuries. It affects people and it warps their judgment.
Feeling funny in my mind.
There's careers at stake, there's promotions at stake, there's agendas.
I'm walking kind of.
DNA testing has been done. There was powerful evidence that points towards another suspect.
The focus is always on the family. So that you start from there and you work your way out.
He didn't voluntarily give us this DNA. We waited in the living room while he was in the bathroom, and that's when I took the cigarette butts out of the ashtray.
It's not just new scientific evidence, it's new evidence.
I'd give my life to know the fucking truth.
Miss Kelly's confession wasn't supposed to be injected into the second trial at all, but it was.
There's nothing more poisonous than having a confession in a jury room.
If that allegation is borne out, they have to throw this case out.
Burnett was wrong in the decisions that he made.
Well, I had to fool with it for 18 years.
No one wants to admit that they made a mistake.
We don't believe the people of Arkansas are going to be satisfied until there is a new trial.
The option to reopen the case was presented to him, and he went, no, we found them guilty, we're done.
We got 17 years invested in sticking to this story, and that makes it even harder.
There's going to be a happy ending. There's just got to be a happy ending to this.
There are a lot of people in prison because of this.
So yeah, that's west of Memphis, and it's just a small little, trailer for the entire thing. But the information that that was put in there, is it one-sided? Absolutely, it is. But at the same time, these men are free now. So going back to 2005, Damien Echols' appellate attorneys went to this. It went all the way to the Supreme Court to be able to test.
Of Arkansas.
Of Arkansas, correct.
Yeah.
To be able to test all evidence, because the prosecution was saying evidence has already been tested, and there's no need to test this other stuff because it's not evidence of guilt or whatever. I don't know if we need to play the little clip that I have of the Supreme Court oral argument. But
no, play that, because just if it's the part I think you're going to play, it's just how nonsensical the state was. Yeah. Go ahead and play that.
Okay.
Did he say nonsensical or non-secular? Just
nonsensical. Both. But if you, okay, I'll pull it up, but just chat about that then.
It hinged on one or two words of this statute, and the state was trying to interpret, just like they were in this recent filing that the opinion just came down a couple of months ago. It's been up on appeal for 2 years. They took another crazy argument, but back in this time frame that SHARMAIN's going to show, the state was taken the position that the DNA testing statute in Arkansas didn't allow for them to test because of one or two words, and they're just, the justices of the Arkansas Supreme Court were just grilling this state's attorney. And Dennis, who was the best post-conviction lawyer in the United States, bar none.
Yes, good. He's
and
really
he's just shredding them. And then this, they sent this guy from the AG's office to Arkansas, and he's arguing. But roll it, and we'll see what it says.
okay.
And
Can you share?
yeah, absolutely. Charmaine, after I show this, I'm going to step away for just a minute. I need to make a phone call, but I'll be right back. Okay.
Okay.
So unless you need to play another video after this, just give me 5 minutes.
No, we should be good. I think this is about 5 minutes long anyways.
Perfect. I'll wait and make sure there's volume.
His life on the line. Good morning, Your Honors. If it please the court, obviously, since my client is sentenced to death, the resolution of this case is of paramount importance to him. But the interests at stake here are far broader, and that is because we are dealing with pure questions of law about the interpretation of what I'll call the DNA statute.
What is the meaning of this Arkansas statute? There's language in that statute that says that if the DNA evidence excludes the defendant as the source of the DNA, which it did in our case, then the trial court has to consider all the evidence, whether it was admitted at trial or not, to see what a reasonable juror would do today.
This statute was passed to exonerate the innocent. The state has really proposed an Orwellian interpretation of the term all. All simply means all.
The state took the position that in weighing all the evidence, what the statute meant to say was that the court consider only all the evidence of guilt, but not the evidence of innocence, which is nonsensical. Because, of course,
told you.
To look at the DNA evidence, but then only consider all the evidence of guilt, the court wouldn't be considering everything that makes a compelling case for innocence.
Let me ask you a question, Mr. Reardon. Let's focus on the evidence situation, and let's say that I agree with you that maybe the trial judge was in error with respect to just limiting the evidence to evidence of guilt. What evidence then would be considered? Would it be the evidence that was presented at the trial, or everything that's occurred over the last 17 years?
I don't think that it can be rationally read other than to say the court must consider that is place in the scale, not only the evidence of guilt, but also all other evidence, whether or not admitted at the first trial.
Court will recognize counsel for athlete.
Good morning. May it please the court. Mr. Eccles has been to this court several times in the last decade, challenging his conviction directly and collaterally. And this statute does not call for a retrial. It's not about trying somebody again for the state to prove guilt twice.
Counselor, what harm is there in allowing him to present the evidence from the last 17 years?
I'm sorry.
What harm is there in allowing him to present all evidence?
Well, the harm is in the finality of a criminal judgment that is not demonstrated to have any constitutional or procedural defect, and just to try it again. I mean, you're suggesting, it sounds to me, Justice Previous, though, every 15 or 17 years or so, we really ought to try cases again to reestablish guilt. I think it's clear that the animating purpose here is not to retry. So the harm is to the criminal justice system's interest in finality and the work that gets done in evaluating whether or not justice has been served in each of the forums that Mr. Eccles has been through already.
It sounds as if your argument is that all evidence of guilt will be considered, but it's going to be extremely difficult to admit all of their evidence that may have been exculpatory.
I think that's That is the argument. It's the second alternative reason the circuit court concluded that relief should be denied. And to me, that's a reasonable statute.
But where does it say all other evidence of guilt?
I understand that it doesn't expressly say that, but you have to interpret the statute in light of its animating purpose, and you have to interpret it in light of rules of grammar. I mean, I think that's a very fair construction.
I'm having trouble following. If the testing has to prove you're innocent, why would you even need a hearing?
Well, again, I think you have to go back to context, Your Honor.
We have to deal with the clear meaning of the statute. I understand your context argument, but we still have to deal with the clear language of the statute.
It comes out of a mindset that says our job as prosecutors is just to make sure that everybody we prosecute is convicted, everybody who's sentenced to death is killed. This is a wrestling match and to the death, and we've got to make sure that we come out on top in each instance. The legislature, in its wisdom, recognized that the criminal justice system, like all human endeavors, sometimes is flawed. But the Attorney General has taken the position that the criminal justice system is free of error and therefore is effectively divine. I quote from their brief in the circuit court: "The state does not shrink from Eccles' charge that relief may never be granted under this view of the statute," its view, "but embraces it out of confidence that the Arkansas criminal justice system does not convict the innocent." The state has taken a position that's directed not only about denying relief to Mr. Eccles, Mr. Baldwin, Mr. Miskelly, but ensuring that no one will ever be able to get relief under the Arkansas DNA statutes.
Reardon, your time has expired.
I thank the court for its attention and recognize the court may feel that the appropriate remedy is a remand to the trial court for an evidentiary hearing. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so nonsensical.
You said it. That's the word
That
we used.
was, Horrigan at first, who agreed with me it was a nonsensical argument. And then the man in the white hair, white beard is Dennis Reardon. They're partners in San Francisco. And actually, I've knew Dennis a long, long time. I knew him from San Francisco, where I grew up. And great lawyer. I mean,
He passed away a couple of years ago, correct?
Pardon?
I think he passed away a couple of years ago.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, yeah.
No, he's great. And then after this, and they were, the Supreme Court granted their relief, and so they hired a bunch of experts, huge name experts. First names are terrible for me with these guys, but Warner Spitz.
Yep.
John Douglas.
Yep.
Dr. Suveron, I can't remember his first name, but he was the odontologist, forensic odontologist who identified Ted Bundy's bite marks to help convict him in that Chi Omega murder case. But and then there was a serologist, a forensic serologist as well, who tested DNA, and
Michael Bodden.
Right, Michael Bodden as well. So so that wasn't this Supreme Court, I believe. I want to say 2005, but in 2007 they did a press conference.
Yeah.
With all of the results of the DNA testing and investigation that these experts did. So the forensic Warner Spitz and Dennis Suveron, is that his first name? But the forensic odontologist, they did their investigation off of hundreds of crime scene photos and autopsy photos. John Douglas did what he always does when he's doing consulting. He doesn't investigate the investigation itself. He starts from scratch and he wants to see the crime scene. He doesn't want to know anything about the people who were convicted or anything. He's there to give his opinion, I guess, on what his findings. And he makes it very clear when he signs on that I will come in and I will do this, and I'm going to do it my own way. You may not like my findings. And they made him sign an agreement saying, okay, but if your findings aren't in favor of us, then non-disclosure. We don't want you going around telling people that. Which defense, that's understandable and reasonable. However, when he started investigating, he did come to the conclusion that more than likely the people that were in prison weren't the type of criminal that would commit this type of, they weren't criminally sophisticated. They were too young. They didn't have.
He had opinions after the hair was tested that was in the ligature, the shoelace, in the knot, came back to the stepfather.
Terry Hobbs. Yeah.
He interviewed Terry Hobbs, and he had opinions about Terry Hobbs.
Well, he said that he interviewed Terry Hobbs twice. Once before they had the DNA evidence.
Yep.
And he said that he was a great guy. He was very personable. John Douglas was very surprised that Terry Hobbs had never been questioned before. Law enforcement had never interviewed him as a parent back when this happened. So he was surprised about that, but he came away from that first interview thinking he's a decent guy. But then the second interview, and when the DNA came out, he realized that pretty much everything that Terry had told him was uncorroborated and, straight up said that he was lying to him. I don't know if I 100%.
Yeah, I think he said it was clear to him that he was so calm, cool, collected that he fit the profile of the classic psychopath or sociopath. And I think he even said, guy like this would pass a polygraph, no problem. Mm-hmm. Even though, somebody with his type of mental makeup and profile, even if they were guilty of the offense, clearly proof positive guilty, the blood that runs through their veins allows them to pass a polygraph. It was not complimentary in the least. And then once all of that came out in that press conference, then people started taking those points and talking about them in public, and then that led to a civil suit, which that turned a civil suit by the stepfather, Hobbs,
against the Dixie Chicks.
Yeah, and
that allowed him to be deposed properly.
Yeah, that turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened for the West Memphis Three, is him filing that civil suit. And the defense attorney in that, she was just brilliant. And I like to say she, slowly and carefully and surgically cut his head off at the neck. And he didn't realize it until he turned to look to his attorney and his head fell off. She was just brilliant. She just cut him up. And they threw his case out and ordered him to pay all of the Chicks' attorney's fees. That's how bad he lost.
Yeah, but I think that the DNA wasn't strong enough to identify him. It was similar. I think 1 in 250 people in that population could be the source of that hair that was found, and same with his friend.
It excluded Damien.
Yes.
Jesse, and Jason, and excluded them. And then he was in a class of people, you're right. And I don't know what the odds were. And then one hair that was found in a log or a tree stump
Yeah.
came back to Hobbs's friend, who I think admitted helping search
For a short period of time.
Yeah.
But there is so much information out there about Terry Hobbs, and even when you look at Paradise Lost 2, it was a witch hunt for John Mark Byers. He's a very strange fellow, but people are doing the exact same thing to these stepfathers as was done to Damien, Jesse, and my point is, you've got the MVAC technology now. You can test that DNA. You can zero in. And once they have a better match, like a better profile, they can enter that into CODIS. And I know that Jesse's attorney, Dan Stidham, he firmly believes that this was the work of an SK. So he believes that this DNA, once it's entered into CODIS, is going to identify the perpetrator. But let's be real. That hair was in the knot of the shoelace that was used to tie Michael Moore. But
in the knot. And there's,
right.
It's funny to me, people know it was found on the shoelace, and it's not found on the shoe, wasn't found on the ligature. They're in water.
Right.
It was in the knot.
Yes.
Peretti, when he sends it, he sees it right from the get-go. He says, send the ligature. He says, send the hair in the ligature for analysis. And it wasn't DNA analysis. It was, hair sample analysis, which isn't anything like DNA.
Right.
And then, even the most recent decision from the Arkansas Supreme Court, it's hair in the ligature, and the ligatures, the shoelaces, all three boys were tied ankle to wrist behind their backs. And when they say in the ligature, it's in the knot. Now, is it possible that there was there was hair laying on the shoe, and then when the knot got tied, the hair got in the knot? Obviously that's something that's possible, but and I can't tell you. I don't know. Is it more likely that that hair fell off, and while the person was tying the knot, that's how it ended up in the knot, or one's equally as likely as the other? I don't know.
Or transfer, because we don't know, and I don't think it's ever been released, that we know that the shoelace that was used to tie Michael Moore is where they found that hair. What we don't know is whose shoelace that was. So if it was Stephen Blanch's, this was his stepdad. So
that's a good point. Yeah, absolutely. And then something else, I don't know that if you saw it, one of the things that they look at very carefully in these types of cases are the knots that are used to tie a ligature, whether it's around somebody's neck, whether it's around their wrists. And they look at it crime to crime, whether the same knots are used. That's one of the ways that, they try and determine whether two different murders are connected. And fortunately, because again, this type of stuff was done by a state lab person, and some of the knots were different from each other.
Yes. Yeah. And it wasn't one of the questions on the FBI questionnaire. to, if anybody was like a war vet from Vietnam or something like that, then it had something to do with the way some of the knots were tied, but there were two different styles of knots. I think I heard that recently, actually.
You're testing my memory. I'd have to go back and pull up his report. Was Terry in Vietnam or no? No,
I don't think so. I don't think so. It was just one of those things that came up, actually, hi Fig, but on True Crime Garage. That was one of the things that Nick had said, that he, I think, I shouldn't say, but I think he said that he had that questionnaire and he would refer to it and use it when he was doing his interviews, when he was researching the case. And that was one of them that I was like I had no idea that was even a thing. Like I had heard that there were two different styles of knots, but I didn't put much thought into it other than maybe more than one person had tied them.
So Boogie Green Street's got a question that's timely. I can't highlight it. Somebody just did. Look at that. Great question.
It is, and my opinion, and Travis can tell us the facts after I'm done with my opinion, is that no, I don't think it will, unless Dan Stidham is right and it gets entered into CODIS and we find out that it's some guy who's now in jail who's been convicted of similar crimes or something, and it's clear and we get a confession. I have a sneaking suspicion that this case is not going to be solved because so much time has gone by.
Yes, two questions there. Start with the first one.
Well, they have to go back down to the trial court now and get permission.
So they've been fighting for 2.5 years to test, and the state took the position that no, they can't test because they took Alford pleas. And so they forfeited their right to go in and try and exonerate themselves with updated testing.
But that was to me, that was absolutely ridiculous. It was because they weren't in state custody anymore, right? Because they were free. Now they didn't have the right to retest and yeah.
So Boogie Green Street, about 2 months ago, the Arkansas Supreme Court issued a ruling saying that the state was taking a totally ludicrous position, which was you had to be in prison in order to get more testing. They said, no, some states do say that. Arkansas doesn't. Similar thing to the DNA statute. Where in the statute does it say you have to be in prison? Well, you don't, it doesn't. But if you look at the legislative history, that's what they mean. And it was, what was it? A 4-3 decision, right, Charmaine?
That's right.
Ruled that no, the defense is right. You don't have to be in prison. And so they're going to start the testing of the ligatures with the MVAC system, and that'll take a few months to work out the protocols to have that done, and then they'll do it, and then however long to get the results back, and then we'll just have to wait and see if it tells anything definitive or not. And I agree with what Charmaine said about the second part of Boogie's question. Will the results reveal the criminals? And it's one of those things just going to have to come back and we'll see. And that's kind of what's going on in the Stephen Avery appeal right now is Wisconsin's DNA statute. You have to show that if testing is allowed, that it's going to show something. And the big example is on Stephen's first case, his first exoneration, which was sexual assault, they requested that fingernail scrapings be tested for DNA, and they came back and they were not Stephen. They were not the victim's husband. They were an unknown third person. And the argument Stephen's attorneys made was, well, she was around water, something rinsing from water, and so therefore they had to be the perpetrator. And even though they came back unknown at that time, they said that doesn't exonerate Stephen. So you had to wait for them to test a hair that was found that came back to Gregory Allen, who was in prison for similar things. And then that's what finally got him exonerated. But the stuff could come back to somebody unknown that's not in CODIS. And so will that help or not help? Will it, come back to more of Terry Hobbs definitively? Will that help? Not help? We'll just need to wait and see. But why fight it to the extent that they are is kind of the underlying question. Why take this nonsensical argument that you have to be in prison to avail yourself of their DNA statute? And but now they're going to get to do it, and it may answer some questions. It may not, but at least everybody will know, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's safe to say that this is probably the last chance that we have to identify somebody else in this case. I think that to me, and I'm still on the fence. I really, really am. I'm still on the fence because they never were proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And we just kind of went through really quickly the evidence that was brought up in trial. And there's so much more. There's so much more that there's no way that we could get to. But I
don't know either, and people ask me, so who, I don't know. I wasn't there. I do know what I ultimately told my client is that with respect to Damien and Jason, they did not get a fair trial. There was no doubt in my mind that they were going to end up being able to get a new trial, that Reardon would at least get them that, and that they should have no hesitation whatsoever being behind the defendants, those two defendants. They should have no hesitation whatsoever putting money into the case, and they put a significant amount of money into the case for experts. Mm-hmm. And are they innocent? I said, I can't tell you that. I can tell you they didn't get a fair trial, and I can tell you that everything is pointing away to them. And something you mentioned much earlier, I just want to touch on real quickly. So can't remember if it was Miss Kelly was saying there's no blood. Actually, interesting about this case at the time, given the time frame it was originally tried, they did luminol, and the luminol, whichever you all know, when you spray that on and it's dark, blood luminesces. Other things can luminesce, but so when they did luminol, it lit up. But the judge didn't allow the state to do the to introduce that into evidence. They couldn't bring that up, and the defense got away with a little bit of that. But they were very careful. There was no visible blood on the ground. How's that?
I will point out that what Jesse had said in that little snippet that I played earlier, that, I don't care if you're a genius, you just can't. Well, somebody did. Somebody did. You know what I mean? So what he said is irrelevant to me because
but you were saying, trying to be fair about what, the judge disallowed the luminol because it wasn't scientifically validated, but I think the majority of states at that time, Texas did, Nevada, California, luminol was admissible to show the possible presence of blood. You could show it to prove that there was an attempt to clean up, because that's what it really shows. You look at a white wall and looks white, and then you turn off the lights, spray it with luminol, and then you can see the white marks and you can see the microscopic blood. The only way you can destroy that is with a certain kind of bleach, which doesn't destroy DNA. One's oxidated bleach and the other's anyway. But I saw the photos going through the stuff. I went, holy cow, why wouldn't this in the thing? And then I saw where they got that excluded, but there was blood all over one area, at least near the creek bank. Do you have an aerial of that area we can look at just real quick?
I'll look for it in just a minute. So I'm sure that you can add to some of these. I'm going to race through a couple of questions here. So
hit the questions.
Is it also true that Hobbs had a trophy, Stevie's knife? According to Pam, Stevie always carried his little pocket knife that his grandpa gave him. According to, and this was true, the knife was found in Terry Hobbs's room. But according to Terry, the reason for that is because he took the knife away from Stevie before he went missing, saying that no 8-year-old boy needs to be walking around with a knife in his pocket. So, I mean, it is something that was said and did happen, but conjecture, yes, absolutely. But
going back to justice for the families, that was part of the rift. Pam saw that, and then Pam later on said they got divorced. She said she had serious doubts about her ex-husband, said that she could see him doing it. John Mark Byers, who was, the second installment of the 3 episodes on HBO Paradise Lost trilogy, John Mark Byers was very animated, and he was just, if you were a documentary producer, he's a dream come true, and was really outspoken about it, very dramatic, and their worst enemy. And then by the 3rd episode, after all of this stuff came out, He was a supporter, wrote Damien a very nice letter and asked for his forgiveness and an apology. But John Mark Byers, by the end, was, his target went from the 3 defendants to the West Memphis Police Department.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. He changed his mind really quickly. And then Bogey. So Dana and Todd, I believe they did remain married. Pam and Terry Hobbs did not. That's quite contentious and a huge story that maybe we can get into next time. But and then Melissa Byers actually passed away. And that is John Mark Byers' wife and Christopher Byers' mom. She passed away. So, and John Mark Byers actually also passed away.
I didn't know that.
It was a motor vehicle accident. Yeah.
Man.
Maybe 3 or 4 years ago, like maybe 5.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he did.
And then the Moores moved away, and they just tried to move on with their lives. I think they moved out of state.
Yeah.
And
I can't remember which one, but I want to say Michael Moore could be buried in Missouri, I think. I want to say there's one. Yes, Christopher Byers is in Tennessee. I believe Stevie. It could be Stevie in Missouri, but one's in Arkansas and the other is in Missouri. So they may have moved home or out of state if that was them.
Last I heard is that they remained firmly convinced that the right 3 were convicted.
Mm-hmm. And then Miranda is wondering, Charmaine, can you and Travis answer my question if you think 1 or 2 of the 3 could be guilty independent of the others, and if one person could commit this crime? My opinion of that is that it's possible. I know that there was some speculation even during trial that Jason had nothing to do with this and he was guilty by association. That's always possible. And I firmly believe that the way the boys were tied is not a normal hog tie. So I think that it makes sense for just spitballing somebody who might have delivered ice cream for a living, who knows, how much weight he can carry a certain way, could have tied the boys up that way to make it easier to carry them himself. Not saying that I think it was planned or anything, but that's my little bit of speculation on that.
Yeah. Miranda, I really struggled with that. So you got 3 8-year-old boys, and we know there were 8 because the cult expert, Dr. Colt, anything under 9.
Wait a second. Are you talking about?
Makes more power if you sacrifice somebody. At first he said 8, and then said, "Well, these boys were 8." He said, "Did I say 8? No, it's 8 or under 9."
This is the occult specialist that got his degree through mail order.
Yeah, he did. Pacific Columbia University, which shut down a couple of 3 years after it opened, and he took no classes. It's just a degree mill. And anywho, 3 8-year-old boys. Now, if it's, I'm trying to think back. They said they were in the 2nd grade, but 8, I would have been in the 3rd grade. And if it's a parental figure that I knew, I would have listened to whatever they said. If you guys are in trouble, you two stay here. You come with me, and takes them behind a bush and knocks them out. And then he comes and grabs one more. I don't see one person with a total stranger comes up, tells the kids, you two stay here, and then he takes one off voluntarily. But maybe it's somebody in a police uniform. But I just don't see a stranger being able to come in and control 3 8-year-old boys unless he has some sort of power over them in terms of parental figure, law enforcement, that sort of thing. But I can't imagine Terry Hobbs and his buddy he played guitar with once in a while, whose hair I just can't imagine that person going along with Terry Hobbs killing 3 boys and keeping it quiet either. Neither of those make sense to me. And so, I just don't know what the answer is.
Can I ask you a question? And maybe you addressed this while I was gone a few minutes ago, but there were some distinct differences all 3 of the boys were, and I don't want to get too graphic, but all 3 of those boys were brutalized pretty extensively. But there were differences in the way that each of them were treated, in some regards. I know that one of them was castrated. There were different injuries.
Well, originally it was thought that, but later on that was kind of
debunked,
refuted, that what had happened was animal predation. That's what
and such.
That's what Werner Spitz indicated.
The pictures, right?
Turtles and
can we just talk really quickly about and I don't really want to get deeply into it, and I have to tell you, go watch West of Memphis, but the medical examiner, and I do that in quotes because of what I know about this guy,
Dr. Peretti,
he was not licensed or registered as a medical examiner. He had failed whatever test it was to get to that level, and he tried 6 times and finally gave up. So he was actually, and I'm not trying to take anything away from him. However, the Bible of forensic pathology pretty much discounted almost everything that he said.
Peretti was Werner's student in Maryland.
Yeah.
He knew him.
And that's another thing about Werner Spitz. And again, I'm a little bit off track here. I had so much respect, and still do, for the man. And then he came on as a defense witness for the Casey Anthony trial. And then further that, he gave some more opinions on the John Benet Ramsey stuff. And some of it just doesn't make any sense. Like, especially the Kaylee Anthony stuff.
Yeah,
I digress. I'm just saying that these experts, they're paid for a reason. They're defense experts.
Yeah, but they had Michael Bodden, and Michael explained in the evidentiary hearing. He said, "Well, we tried to." The way we handle these things is we tried to sit down with Peretti and say, here's what we have problems with. And here's what we think, and, tell us why we're wrong. And we get together and kind of talk about this stuff. And Peretti said this and that. And then, there were slides that showed ripping, like it would be, this was around the area that originally they said was surgically excised in the trial, is what Peretti testified to, that sharp instrument. And then they reviewed the slides microscopically that showed torn ends rather than cut ends. And then they said Peretti said, yeah, I will get back to you and I will get you this information. And then in the evidentiary hearing, they were asked, well, did you ever get this information back? And no, he never got back to us on it. But, the other thing too, they showed in that trailer, there was a ton of information in that trailer, like a lot of trailers do, give you little 2-second snippets. There was two election signs. One was the prosecutor, Fogelman, running for something. And then the other was that judge retired and became a state senator, and it showed an election sign for him. And he stayed on the case for 18 years and just kept affirming and affirming and affirming. And in those small rural towns, and we got this stuff going on right now in a case that DAs stick with, finality. 80-90% of that town, I knew a woman, her aunt lived there. And about 5 years ago, we're going through the West Memphis case on somebody's Patreon, and she asked me to come on because she knew I was indirectly involved in the case. And she mentioned, yeah, my aunt lives there, my Aunt Patsy. And, ask her what the deal is, what do people think? So number one, nobody talks about that. You don't bring, it's, unwritten rule, you don't bring up the West Memphis 3. It's like it's a stain on the town. They'll talk about it in private, but if you're in a diner, you look like a reporter, and what do you think about the West? They're not going to talk to you. You're an outsider. So that was number one. And then number two, her Aunt Patsy told her 80-90% of the town believed they had convicted the right 3. Other 10 or 20% are newcomers, and they don't matter anyway. Don't go to church, or but which is what you typically find. And then big names. Johnny Depp said he associated with the case because he felt, he saw similarities in him and Damien to the extent that he dressed different, like Damien did. He was into music that not everybody was. Basically, high school age, Johnny said, I was an outsider. I was the weird kid. So, when I watched it a lot, I could identify a lot with Damien, and I he firmly believed when he saw it that they were convicted merely because they dressed different, listened to Metallica, who they hung out with. And then Henry Rollins put in a bunch of money and then put together bands to record an album. All of the proceeds went to the expert fund. I think the experts, that crew, just the experts, I think it's between 300,000 and 500,000, 350,000. A lot of money for top tier people, and to fly them all into a press conference in Little Rock at the Arkansas Law School. But you know, Dennis Reardon had the best of the best to cover every aspect of it.
So Bogey, how large was the little pocket knife? I'm gonna say just a regular little pocket knife, but again, go watch West of Memphis. I think Pam actually even pulls it out. So
Yeah, he always had it with him. It wasn't that knife was used in any way, but he carried that knife with him everywhere. And that, you know, then she found it in Terry's dresser, and you know, why on earth would you have this? There's no reason for you to have it. My son always had it.
Yeah.
Quickly, I just want to say to Don Spang, thank you so much for the $10.
Oh my gosh, thanks. Nice.
Thank you. I know that you said that a few minutes ago, but I didn't want to interrupt, but thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Anytime people donate money when Sonny's not here,
we buy vodka and make Caesars with it, and Clamato juice.
Well, just anything that proves to Sonny that she's not needed makes us all happy. So
I need her.
Of course we need her.
The viewpoints of almost a lawyer are not the official viewpoints of the guests on this show.
Because Sonny's sitting at home going, yeah, 51 people watching.
Sonny said she was going to pop in.
She's not invited. I blocked her.
I'm really offended. She said, well, if we go out, you know, but I'll pop in when we get back. Sure. There's no way they're on a 5-hour date.
Yeah,
there's absolutely over. And Sonny will just take over. And I think we can all agree I have done a sub-adequate to adequate job conducting this live.
No, I think it's great because, like I said, the questions you ask help bring out more information instead of just glossing over everything because we're you know.
Oh, absolutely. I insisted. I said I wouldn't do it unless almost a lawyer was here.
I've got 1,000 more questions now that we've I feel like we barely scratched the surface.
No, and that's exactly it. And I feel like I've missed a lot of comments. I don't know if you start any, but
well, you know,
are we going to say that we're going to do a follow-up? Is that something that we're allowed to say?
Sure, we can. See if you can find some more questions.
And absolutely, I will. I do want to say quickly, though, you know, this is one of those cases, and because I mean, one of the reasons that I really have never looked into this case until, you know, I knew like a little bit of it, but one of the reasons that I never really looked into it deeply is because it's one of those cases that, you know, like when you look at like it's like a Jean Bonnet or a Zodiac, where it's like it's almost like a
folklore.
I mean, yeah, it's one of those cases where it's like if you're not gonna understand and decipher every aspect of it, it's hard to even know where to you know, begin with it. Because one, it's 31 years old, and two, it is such a complex and layered case. So making sense of some of it is confusing and overwhelming and intimidating. But I really appreciate your explanations of everything.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So you know, like a lot of things. So there's this documentary by Sanofsky and can't remember.
Berlinger.
And
Berlinger.
who have a shit ton of money. And hope that doesn't get us a yellow, because I promised Sonny we wouldn't get a yellow. They had a ton of money and backed by Walsh indirectly, maybe. I'm not sure if at that time, but HBO. So, before Netflix and the streaming, but it turns into a trilogy, and a ton of people are watching it. And of course, it's slanted, biased. The producers obviously did it at an angle to create questions in the verdict, especially with regard to Damien and Jason. And so then that launched a crew of people in California, supporter group, that put together, this is before social media, before Facebook. What was the thing that preceded Facebook that Justin Bieber bought? MySpace. It's before any of that. What they had was essentially a forum that you could post questions, had chat rooms, and they would call up Damien, and Damien would answer questions in the chat, and some guy's typing. Can't remember his name, glasses. But so they had a tech guy from Hollywood. They had a Hollywood PR person, a core group of 5 of them. And they put together the web page, and then Callahan, he got all of the transcripts, all of the crime scene photos. I mean, everything. I was pretty shocked at what he got. So you wanted to dig into the case, literally. Thousands and thousands of pages on the Callahan site. And I don't know, if that was one of the first cases that, now that's common. After Making a Murderer, people got together and there was a site, westmemphis3.org or something. They had the transcripts. They did a GoFundMe to get trial transcripts. But first case I was ever aware of, my client said, yeah, there's this stuff, and so I was able to get a fair amount there. But then the producers, like in Making a Murderer, HBO arranged that they would videotape the whole thing. So I was able to get the complete videotapes and watch all of the trial, all of the hearings, not just read the cold record, we call it. So this stuff, kind of starting, and then, there was a book by Myra, terrible with names. She wrote a book that was pro-defense. They got the wrong folks. To me was kind of what launched true crime in the modern digital age. I might be wrong about that there were other cases, but I can't remember a 3-part documentary starting in the late 90s, going up to the point where they got out of prison. And then Making a Murderer, obviously, at the other end of the time scale. But the first book that kind of launched it all was In Cold Blood, but there were always true crime detective magazines, noir magazines. And then Um,
And you had that a little bit with the staircase, just because I mean that docuseries, it did run over the span of what, 8-9 years.
yeah, and that came
Later. Yeah.
5-10 years later, and then we had the Jinx with
Robert Durst.
yeah, and so completely different how things are done now. There's no YouTube creators, and now instead of looking at the aftermath of cases like West Memphis 3, Durst.
And cases are getting new life. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar, but there's an entire new generation of people that have been tuning in to the Menendez brothers, and it's
no
funny.
kidding. Wow.
And it's one of the things that's funny is that cultural perception of things that are pertinent in cases change a very pertinent dynamic of a case, because if you look at a lot of younger people who were not alive at the time that the Menendez brothers committed their crime, there's a much stronger push by younger people that are just now following that case into thinking that those men should be exonerated and released from prison, because our view as a society and culture has evolved and changed so much based on abuse and SA from to children, and the effects it can have on you and what can it make you do. Granted, does anyone have the right to go in with a shotgun and blow their parents away? No. But it's amazing the support that those guys are getting from younger people, especially. We're seeing it in the Scott Peterson case. There's new movement in that where people are once again saying, maybe he didn't do it. So it's funny to see when these cases kind of catch on in popular culture years and years later, the public perception can be so different. I mean,
absolutely.
Look at Gypsy Rose.
What's interesting is now, instead of watching the aftermath, we're following them real time in droves, like Vallow and Idaho 4 and Karen Reed and Richard Allen and on and on and on. The New Mexico movie set, there's 10, 20 going on, and it's people are following, leading up to it, kind of making a decision or considering both sides that are coming out, and then wanting to see the trial, how it unveils. So tell me, is that just because of the technology and the information superhighway? Is that what the difference is? And then what do you think attracted all of the celebrity to West Memphis 3? Didn't get that in Making a Murderer, even though there were a lot of supporters, but what is it? What do you think it was about West Memphis 3 that you had all of those celebrities coming out? Because I think that was one of the first times you had that much support.
Well, if you look at and this is just my this is just my opinion on that. But if if Paradise Lost came out in 1996, which whether people like it or not, it is kind of the documentary that highlighted this on a national level, and got the story into the homes of a lot of people. And part of that is because it was in the infamousy of HBO. If you look back in the mid 90s like that, not everyone had satellite or cable, so HBO was a luxury, and that was something that if people could watch something on HBO, it everything that HBO put out at that time became kind of a big deal. And I think that was probably the first forte into true crime, or one of them. And so I wouldn't be surprised that the whole pop culture aspect caught on with that. Plus we were just out of OJ, so the appetite for true crime was there, and then you had a well produced documentary on the case, and you had these guys that liked this certain kind of music. They were kind of off cast, and then you look at the people that clung onto that, like Eddie Vedder, and these people, they were kind of natural people that they would want to jump in their corner because they probably have felt that way in their lives. I'm sure Eddie Vedder was looked at as kind of a not following the straight and narrow when he was in high school and deciding what he wanted to do for a career. And like I said, I think now we see just the cultural change in what we deem acceptable. And I use the Menendez brothers as an example because that crime was horrific. But society's views on SA and child abuse and holding people responsible for actions that they take when they're being abused. We have generations now that they look at that very differently than people did at the time that crime took place. And so there's a huge audience of people that don't think that those guys genuinely deserve to be in prison because they have been victimized, in their opinion.
So there's one, I need to wrap this up for this time, but we're going to do a follow-up, and I'm I was stoked for this one, but the next one, I can't even begin to explain to you how excited I am for it. But there's a question that I think will keep us talking for just a few more minutes. I'm sorry, I have to go up. It says, and it asked for Travis first, but I'm going to go first because I feel like I can get mine out a little bit quicker.
Where is that highlighted?
I don't know what time zone you're at, but my time zone is 10:46. Are you 12:46? Travis, who do you think and how was this done? Conclusion. And my conclusion, I don't know who did it, but I think that I do think that it was more than likely one person. I believe in John Douglas's assessment that it's a personal cause homicide, in that it wasn't financially motivated. It wasn't the S word. It wasn't motivated by that. It wasn't a pedophile or anything like that. So personal cause. Seems to me like they probably should have started investigating the family first back then, seriously looking into them. Maybe we wouldn't be here right now. And I'm not saying that Damien, Jesse, Jason, all three or one couldn't be guilty, because maybe they could. But the strongest evidence to me that points to their innocence is how hard they're still fighting to get that evidence tested. If you're a guilty person and you're free, you'd shut up and go away. And the only person that's done that is Jesse Miskelly. And from what I understand, he has his own reasons for not being part of this fight. So, but Jason, he's part of the Innocence Project. If it wasn't for his conviction, he would have gone through law school. He wants to know who killed these little boys. and Damien does as well. So those are my final thoughts on this part, but follow-up is going to be super great. So go, Travis, your turn.
I touched on it earlier, what I set out to do on behalf of my client, and couldn't even say, yeah, for a fact I know they're innocent, but I felt that there were serious constitutional violations in the case, that there was significant new evidence, and that there was no question in my mind that Reardon would get them a new trial. And a lot of reasons for that. He even had a concurrent federal habeas going. The state wanted the federal judge to kick it out. He refused. He said, no, you guys are going to come back every 90 days, every 180 days, and you're going to give me a status. And it kept the state's feet to the fire, kept the Arkansas Supreme Court's feet to the fire, that they had to give that DNA statute a serious hard look, which they did. And otherwise, that federal judge was going to start to poke into things, and he would have allowed DNA testing, is what my conclusion was. And there wouldn't have been anything the state could have done about that. And lo and behold, it comes back. Nothing pointed to the three defendants, and it excluded them. And so I have serious doubts any of the three were involved in any way. I just can't figure out. It's pretty easy to go along with John Douglas. I agree with you there. I mean, he knew exactly who the Unabomber was going to be, in pretty minute detail. And then lo and behold, Ted Kaczynski matched Douglas's profile to a T. I mean, it was scary. So, I think that has to be seriously looked at. But I don't have a favorite suspect or anything like that. I'm just really hoping something does come back proof positive with the MVAC testing for everybody's sake. I'm sorry some of these parents have passed away. They've will never have gotten any peace or, quote, closure, unquote, which no parent gets by a conviction. They certainly don't get it when the state has to allow 3 Alford pleas. But I'm glad they were able to break through and move forward on the most advanced type of evidence collection, DNA wise, that's available, that has been proven in peer reviewed articles is better at sampling than plain swabbing. And so hopefully it will come back, and then hopefully it will come back to something that's significant. And then hopefully that provides peace and comfort and closure to everybody and results in true justice. That's where I'm at on it.
Mm-hmm. And there's such a good discussion going on in chat, and I wish I had more time, but my dog, if you guys have been watching, I've got till 11 o'clock before he starts attacking me.
Well, make that dog talk again.
I don't have to make him do anything. He just does it when he's ready.
Boy, the other night, the show kind of ended on your dog complaining, and I thought, man, what is it? A Great Dane?
No, he's a bull mastiff mixed with.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, he's a big boy.
Yeah, I typed in there. I canceled my plans to come up there and visit you after hearing that dog.
Yeah, he's super friendly. He'll lick you to death. That's
sure. Up to a point.
Yeah. So
I have a quick question. So if if anyone that is not familiar with this case, if they, I know that every documentary or every piece that you watch is going to have some sort of narrative or bias, but if you had to recommend one, just across the board, objective, comprehensive look into this case, if people want to devote the time to it, what would you suggest?
I'd say for me, and please jump in, Charmaine. For me, what I was most interested in, is I got to meet him, and I've been there, a younger defense attorney, and you're thrown this case, and your client's confessed 3 times, 5 times, 15 times, doesn't even understand who you are at first, is then getting somebody to come in and help you, and then kind of steers you in the wrong direction by saying, this is a bite mark on this kid's face. That's something we see, in an intimate relationship, parent-child, true anger. And, that turned out to be all completely wrong. Is Dan Stidham's book about what he was faced with, what was happening. And, I think it's great from that perspective, but it's not it's clearly from the perspective of one of the defense attorneys and what he went through as a defense attorney, about the evidence, about what the state did. So it's not fair and balanced from that standpoint. I think he's accurate and 100% based on what he says the evidence was, what they got. I don't think he embellishes anything on that. But of course, he's going to give his interpretation on why the state did certain things, didn't do certain things, so on and so forth. But I highly recommend his book.
Excellent. Charmaine, do you have anything else?
And I mean, this has nothing to do with our conversation earlier, but I truly believe that, all of the documentaries are good, but they are very one-sided. They are very, very one-sided. And then if you go on the internet and you start reading about reasons why the West Memphis 3 are guilty, you're going to get the complete polar opposite of that. So it's going to be like your Delphi community, right? Where it's either this or it's that, and there's no in between. To me, the best source, honestly, the best source for factual information on both sides, not even lying, and I swear to God, Aspen has nothing to do with earlier today, True Crime Garage. You go back to 2016 when they did their first 3-part series, and then they've done more every season. They did more, I believe they just released 2 more last week. They interviewed Dan Stidham on this book just absolutely recently, but they as far as I can tell, one is more leaning towards guilty and one is more leaning towards innocent. And they go through the timeline meticulously, the facts meticulously. I couldn't recommend that particular podcast for this case more. If you want to get the both sides of it.
Maybe they would be interesting points of view to hear from. So, we'll try to schedule something in a week or two, depending on people's schedules, and along with Travis if he's available, and Charmaine if she's willing to come back and talk more about this, because I said I have more questions now than I did before, and I'd like to hear more. So I really appreciate everyone's time tonight. Do either of you have anything you want to say before we go? Because I know, Charmaine, you're already 3 minutes past the dogs.
Yes, he's upstairs, so I have a couple of minutes, and I just want to say thank you to Travis. This has been a long time in the making. I was really looking forward to it, and I love hearing your thoughts and knowing that you're kind of indirectly involved in the case really interests me.
I always love being here. So thanks for having me again, and wish Sonny could have been here. Did we get a yellow strike at least? I was hoping to get yellow. No yellow.
Travis, you don't think I handled it okay by myself? I'm kidding.
No, sincerely, I always have a great time when I come on, and
Yes, rest in peace, Stevie Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers, the real West Memphis 3. It's what it's all about. Try to find them some justice. And somebody said earlier, and I'm sorry, I just have to say it because I'll forget it for next time, that this case is closed. They pled guilty. There has been a conviction, time served, the rest of it. This case is not an open investigation. So I can't remember who said it at the beginning, but just FYI, it is a closed, finished case. Nick and the captain at True Crime Garage are excellent, aren't they, though?
Yeah. But that could change depending on the testing results. And if they come back strong enough, then the 3 that did the Alford pleas can request the court to throw out their convictions, and then they would be factually innocent. Whether it gets to that point or not, it's been a 10-year fight just to get it to that point where they can do testing. But no, that's absolutely true.
It's case closed.
It's kind of, they're in a legal limbo, and we'll see.
One more question. How is an Alford plea introduced?
How is an Alford plea introduced?
In this case, it was the defense, I believe, that brought it in.
It was
Alford
Braga, who's from Washington, D.C., and a top-notch lawyer. There was an impasse. The defense wanted dismissal of all 3 charges and the defendant's release. The state said, no, we're going to fight this all the way. We're going to retry all 3 defendants. And then there were some health concerns with respect to Eccles, and Braga said, well, what about a Alford plea? And he went and talked with the state and talked more and more and more about it. And he was able to broker a deal where that was going to be satisfactory to everybody. And he's taught a class on it. can't remember if it was at West Virginia Law School or Georgetown, but I'm sorry, University of Virginia. If you're watching this, please forgive me. UVA or Georgetown, and he's taught a class about it, and but he's said, you kind of know it's a good deal when everybody's mad, and that's true in this case. Both sides were upset, and but it's not perfect, but it was something that it was half a loaf. So,
right. Well, and I think what a quote from Eccles after being released in regards to the Alford plea, he said, "I have now spent half of my life on death row. It is a torturous environment that no human being should have to endure, and it needed to end. I am innocent, as are Jason and Jesse, but I made this decision because I did not want to have to spend another day of my life behind of those bars." So
he had a tough time. There were allegations that in this row of cells on death row, that the inmate next to him was able to dig a hole between the two cells and would go from one cell to the other and sexually assault him. That's just in some of the materials I was reviewing, and death row isn't a pleasant place anywhere. It's completely, brutal. Jesse Miskelly struggled with just complying with the rules, and his circumstances completely different. Damien, I think a lot of people were attracted to him, attracted in the sense, empathetic with him. He read in prison and educated himself. You look what he was interested in high school, and he's reading about different religions and philosophy, and buying books at the library, 10-cent books on different things and mysticism, and obviously a bright guy and just needed to find his direction, artistic type. Jason, sharp kid, did well in school, just needed to figure out a way to get into advanced education. And, he would have gotten out of West Memphis. It's just not a pleasant place to be. But like I said earlier, Damien, there were genuine concerns about his eyesight failing, and we can say for another day that what the life expectancy, because of the diet you have in typical American prison, every year in prison, they have studies on this. Your life expectancy declines by a certain amount, and he's 18 years on death row, and at some point, they're going to start setting execution dates, And that cannot be pleasant, but so there's that.
Well, I think that's a good place to end it for tonight. I know Charmaine's got to go, but I welcome. I thank you guys for letting me join, and hopefully we can do this again soon. But I hope everyone has a good night.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, have a wonderful weekend, and be nice to your mom. And Mother's Day is Sunday, at least in the U.S. I don't know what they do in Canada.
They don't.
We appreciate our moms.
Good, that you should. Love your mom.
Maybe next time we can all argue about Delphi, but not tonight. So everyone have a good night. Outro.
Good night.
See y'all soon. Bye.